The village where my grandmother lives is about 30 kilometers away from the city where I live. Apart from me and my dad, she has no one left. She lives alone in the house. There is almost no one left in the village either. No neighbors. But despite this, all attempts to take her to the city did not lead to anything good. The grandmother flatly refused to even hear that in the city she would be given all the conditions: running water, sewerage, stores at hand, not a delivery truck, which appears in the village once a week, a hospital 2 steps away. But it is impossible to bribe the grandmother with anything. I will not go, and that's it. So I went to grandmother every other day. The good thing is that I had my own car, brought food, did all the housework, stove heating, washing, cleaning, and other household chores. On weekends I stayed in the village. That's how we lived, until my grandmother started to get sick often. I took a vacation and went to the country for the time of vacation. Grandma was fading every day. We had an ambulance almost every day. They didn't take her to the hospital. I kept in touch with the doctors. Before going to bed I put a drip. Thank God I was a doctor by training. The day went like this. Early in the morning I called the hospital, got breakfast, took shots, pills, did housework, then lunch. During the breaks I helped my grandmother get out of bed, put on clothes, took her to another room, then again took pills, shots, if necessary an ambulance, then again housework, household chores, dinner. After supper I would put my grandmother to bed, put her on an IV, sit down next to her in a chair, and we would talk. All the chores would end before midnight, and, tired, going to bed, I would fall asleep quickly. This night there was no sleep. I tossed and turned, tried to sleep, to no avail. Then I heard a knock at the door. The clock was about 3 a.m. I don't call an ambulance at that time. No one was waiting for me. I got up quietly, went to check on my grandmother. She was asleep. I went to the door and listened. Someone was obviously behind it. The knocking repeated again. I asked, "Who?" No one answered, but kept knocking, not loudly, but very often and persistently. And there was a damp smell in the hallway, a draft, even though the windows and doors were tightly closed. Then I heard my grandmother calling me from the room. The knocking stopped, and I ran to her. When I came to the room, I saw that my grandmother was asleep, and she obviously could not call me. There was another knock on the door, and on top of that someone was pounding on the roof. Someone was knocking on the windows. I was already on the verge of hysteria. Then something rumbled in the hall. The smell intensified, and in the corridor I heard the sound of breaking glass, and then suddenly it was gone, as if nothing had happened. In the morning my grandmother felt much better. She got out of bed, came out into the corridor, and asked me why the window was broken. I did not, of course, tell her everything. I said that I had accidentally broken it myself. I asked her if I had woken her up. Much to her surprise, she said that she had slept soundly and had not heard anything. I stayed at my grandmother's for the rest of my vacation, and nothing else happened, neither during the vacation nor after. But I still tortured myself with questions. Who was it that came? Why? Why did he break the window? Did he break it to scare me? Or did he want to break in? And why didn't he get in? And what would happen if I did open the door? I'll tell you right away that I'm a terrible skeptic. Well, I can't believe that you can't touch, lick, or smell something. But once a story happened to me, which I still think about, and which we discuss periodically at the family table. I give you my word of honor that the story is real. I decided to tell it to sort out the situation. Maybe someone else has faced with the same. And give me an answer who or what it was. At that time I was 12 or 13 years old. My mother was dating a man, and one fine day my stepfather, Uncle Vol.1, invited my mother and me to his house. However, not to his house, but to the apartment of his friend, who had gone away and asked us to look after the apartment. At the appointed time we arrived at the apartment. It was an old house, 2 stories high, Stalinist. As I remember now, the atmosphere was so depressing, as if we were in a swamp, musty smell, half darkness, old age, forgetfulness. I regretted very much that I agreed to go with my mother. I would have been better off walking with my girlfriends or watching TV. So, there was absolutely nothing to do there. I wanted to just get up and leave. Where would you go? The adults stay overnight. And, while my mother and stepfather were cooking dinner, I decided to amuse myself. I began to climb everywhere, checking cabinets, nightstands, windowsill in search of anything interesting. I found only the owner's guitar, a hoop, and a long aluminum thing, like a pipe. At first she tortured the guitar, then twirled the hoop, then put 2 chairs, put an aluminum tube on top of them, and began to jump over it, back and forth, back and forth. When she got tired of this activity, she turned on the TV. Then my mother called me for dinner. The whole thing was left in the hall, and of course I didn't take anything away. I was a naughty girl. The 3 of us were sitting in the kitchen having dinner. Suddenly we hear the sound of a fallen pipe. We startled. Mom went to check what was wrong. When she came back, she said that I was shocked and told me to clean up where I had taken everything. I was too lazy. I stuffed everything under the old couch, tamped it down deeper, made some noise in order to be sure everything got under it, and then I was back in the kitchen. Soon it was time to go to bed. My mom and I went to the hall, where I had set up the playground 2 hours earlier, and my stepdad went into the other room. Oddly enough, we left the light on in the hallway. We all initially had some sort of uneasy feeling about being in this apartment. So, my mother lay on the edge, and I lay against the wall. Gradually fell into a doze, and it was either a dream or a reality. To this day, I can't understand how it happened. I seem to be asleep, my eyes are closed, but I see everything around me. I see my mother lying, a dark silhouette next to the bed, as if a man was squatting and silently looking at us. I hear my mother saying, "Vova, why aren't you asleep? Go, we have to leave early in the morning." Then my mother turns to me and I turn around, getting into a comfortable position. Then I see my mother get up and leave the room. And at that moment, I roll over onto my back and see a furry, hairy something above me. It's in the air. I remember the grinning, evil white eyes, and then I yell, "What are you looking at me for?" And then I got up on the bed. After 3 seconds, my mother and Uncle Volodya run into the room with frantic eyes, turn on the light and say, "What happened? Who were you yelling at?" I explain everything, that I was dreaming. I myself was sitting in a strange state, but was it a dream? The adults went into the kitchen to smoke, and 20 minutes later we packed up and left the apartment for our house. To all my questions, my mother is silent and jokes that I'm overworked, overhopped, and that we won't sleep here now anyway, and we have to get up early. It's better to take a cab home. Only 3 days later, my mother and stepfather told me what they had experienced that night. When we went to our separate rooms and began to fall asleep, my mother also saw this silhouette next to the bed where we slept. She thought it was Uncle Volodya, who had come in and was whispering on her shoulder and keeping quiet. Mom told him to go to bed. She turned away. She felt uncomfortable. She turned around and the silhouette was gone. So she decided to check. Why was her stepfather sitting by the bed? She went to his room, but he was sleeping like a light, and when she asked him about it, he said that his mother was imagining things and that he had not been sitting anywhere and had not gone into the room. And as they were talking, I got a shout from the hall. "What are you looking at me for?" To say that the adults were frightened is nothing to say. We concluded that I disturbed my behavior to the spirit of this apartment, stirred up his nest under the bed, and in general made angry. And no one knows how it would have ended if I hadn't yelled at this creature and if the adults hadn't come running. After that, Uncle Volodya never went back to any friend to watch the apartment. We love to travel with our family, not by the sea, although we love it too, but to travel. Accommodation by route we book in advance, focusing on high ratings and convenient location. Sometimes we book hotels, but more often apartments. In view of the fact that we travel with a dog, apartments for us became more preferable. In August, traveling through Europe, we stayed in an apartment in Krakow. We decided to stay there for a few days so as not to hurry to enjoy the architectural monuments and beauties of this beautiful city. The apartment is located opposite the wall castle. The first night only the dog behaved restlessly. It was not barking and whining, which has never happened to him before, and he is an avid traveler. And we were all so exhausted from the road and the trip that we slept like death. We woke up only from the crying of our dog, but quickly fell back asleep. The second night was not so quiet. In the middle of the night, someone was knocking on the door. My husband and I went to the door. I speak Polish well, but I did not dare to go alone. It's 3:30 in the morning. The knock is very loud. The dog sits at his feet and makes a strange sound, like a grunt. We look through the peephole and see nothing. Although the knocking continues, I ask, "Who's there?" And in response, "Woman, open up. We need to talk." But there's no one at the door, and the conversation is going on. The voice is pleasant, female, a little frightened. My husband and I look at each other, scared for both of us. My husband says, "Let's open the door. Maybe someone needs help." Well, who to open something? Because no one cannot see. The door peephole has a great view. I see the entire landing, including the rug at the door. In general, we did not open and reported to the invisible man with whom we were talking. In response, there was a huge bang on the door, as if kicked, but the sound was there, but the vibration of the door was not. I just leaned against the peephole. I did not feel the impact, but only heard it. After that it all stopped, a little more stomping at the door, then drinking tea. We went to bed. We did not fall asleep immediately. The dog asked to go to bed, although he never sleeps with us. The children did not even wake up. The apartment is very large and the doors to their rooms were closed. The third night, the time was about the same. Again knocking, again asking to open. In general, everything was exactly the same, only after the refusal to open the doors. There was a pleasant laugh and the knocking came from the inside of the door. That is, from the apartment. Right next to us something was knocking on the door. A dog whimpered in the children's room. The children woke up. We were actually already in the nursery too. And this thing banged on the door a couple more times, and at the same second the door to the nursery swung open. I didn't hear any footsteps, just the heavy oak door swinging open like a draft. Then another chuckle and the door slammed shut. We were in a state of confusion and consternation. Next, no one could sleep until morning. Of course, in the morning we moved out. What it was, we do not know. From the owners of the apartment, nothing to find out. Our neighbors said that in this house during the Second World War was the Gestapo headquarters, but the apartment is on the second floor, not in the basement where they killed and tortured people. That's how Krakow impressed us more than we thought it would. This mystical story happened quite recently.